He put the job out for bid. Matthew was a first-century Jew who had bid for the privilege of collecting the enemy's taxes from his own people. He'd be like one of you men bidding for the privilege of collecting Russia's taxes in Cleveland. You know how he'd be loved? When he walked down the street, every Jew deliberately turned their back to him, not permitting him to see their face. If they were forced to look at him, they spit in his face. That, too, was the custom. He had absolutely no friends except the other tax collectors and the posses, until one day a carpenter walked by. He said, "Hey, Matt, how would you like to follow me?" He got up from his table, walked away, never went back, and if we can believe tradition, it's only tradition, we can't prove it. He died an awfully horrible death in a place that we call Iran. But at that moment of time, of all those men walking with Jesus, not one of them but Matthew would have talked to a dog or a pig, what they called the Roman legionnaires. Matthew dealt with Romans. Matthew knew Romans by their first names. Romans had been keeping him alive for we don't know how long. You see, we don't really know which tax he was collecting. But regardless of type, it called for a table set up in town, and a Roman legionnaire standing in back of him with a sharp spear, as much to keep him alive as to assist in collecting his taxes. See, a traitor is number one on any patriot's hit list in any conquered nation, and Matthew was a traitor. Suppose it was the personal tax. Caesar might say your tax was 50. Matt would look you over, decide he could get 100 for the jacket. That was your tax. If you wanted to argue, he collected from your estate, right on the spot. He never lost, he got extremely wealthy and extremely hated. But he dealt with Romans. And that gets awfully, awfully heavy when you realize that the 28th chapter of the book of Matthew is the only one in the entire Bible that could have been dictated by a Roman legionnaire. Sure, Matthew wrote it, but the information in that chapter could never have been given to him by anybody in the world but a Roman soldier, because there was a Roman guard in the tomb of Jesus. For this, I wound up in the Library of Congress. I discovered that the book we needed was awfully difficult to get in this country. It's almost classified. The Military Institutions of the Roman Legion, written in the year 390 by a character named Flavius Frigidius Renatus. Imagine doing that to a poor innocent baby. Somebody must have hated that baby before he was born. He was a Roman military historian. By the year 390, the Legion had begun to fall apart. Caesar wanted to restore it to what it had been in the first century. Flavius was telling him how. He described the Roman Guard at the time of Christ. It was not two or three sleepy-eyed characters the way the painters usually show it, leaning on a stick. It was a fixed fighting unit, very similar to today's Green Beret or Navy SEALs. That's why the book's so difficult to get in this country. Our own military would just as soon you didn't read it. We discovered that our own Green Beret is being trained by the principals in that book. That's how rough they were. Napoleon said they never went anywhere without a copy of that book in his pocket. Apparently, the only person who should have read it and didn't was Caesar. The Legion was destroyed. But a Roman Guard consisted of anywhere from 4 to 20 men, usually 16, superbly trained with a spear, a short sword, a dagger. Each man carried 5 javelins in the curve of his shield. Each man carried a sling, his primary weapon, with which he was trained to make one swing around his head and heave a 1-pound rock 70 feet and get a 12 to 14-inch post every single time at 70 feet. These jokers were lethal. If you can believe Flavius, they could pick off the head, stomach, or feet at will at 70 feet. They fought back to back in a geometrical pattern, each man responsible for only 6 square feet of space and his buddy's back. When one man moved, they all moved. A living fighting tank. As far as I could find out, they never lost a fight. They were considered invincible in the first century. This is what was guarding the tomb of Jesus. To make it better, Polybius describes them about 2 centuries before Christ. He says that if the guard was assigned to sentry duty and one man out of 16 fell asleep, all 16 would be executed because they had failed their mission. Fantastic. But that meant that if you were on a guard and you looked sleepy, you had 15 buddies whose lives depended on you staying awake. They'd have propped you up on the points of 15 spears if they had to. This was not American justice. The trial would be convened within the hour by the tribunes of the Legion. If you were found guilty, Polybius said you'd always be found guilty. That's predestination. Your own tribune touched you on the shoulder with a vine staff, the signal for the entire battalion to beat you into hamburger with clubs and stones. Your best friend had to take a swing at you. Then a trumpet would be blown for every Roman executed to let the whole world know, if this is the way we handle ours, what do we do to you? Fantastic. And a few years ago, there was a book called The Passover Plot that said that 16 of these characters fell asleep. They snored mightily, in unison, maybe in harmony. while a collection of itinerant fishermen, an ex-crooked tax collector, a 14-year-old boy, and maybe a few women, sneaked in by night, quietly. They rolled at least 1.5 tons uphill, quietly. They stole the body of Jesus, and they got away with it. Well, anything is possible in this crazy old world of ours, but that's awfully high in my list of improbabilities. To make it better, the stone was sealed with Pilate's seal. That one was easy. A gob of wax or clay on each side of the stone, 2 more vertically, 2 leather thongs, a gob of wax where they crossed, Pilate's ring, applied in the presence of the legion. The penalty for breaking the seal of Rome without authorization? Crucifixion, upside down. If they couldn't find you, they'd round up every man, woman, and child in a given village or town and crucify the whole place. That's why Hitler learned it. You simply did not break the seal of Rome without authorization. We did not intend to do all this, but I think that we have shown rather conclusively that never in the history of mankind has the body of a condemned criminal been as securely guarded as was Jesus of Nazareth. All Rome was going to make sure that he didn't come out of that hole. That's why nobody but one of them, the pride of the Roman legion, could possibly have told Matthew what he wrote. And nobody but Matt would have talked to a Roman to find out what he had to say. Yeah, it's like a drumhead. You see, they were there to guard a seal. If that seal got broken, 16 Romans died. They'd have killed anyone who came within 70 feet of it. That's what they were there for. Nobody in their right mind would go near the garden. Sure, the women came back in innocence on Sunday. They didn't know the soldiers were there. While they were home obeying their holiday laws, their own high priest was breaking them by going to Pilate and asking for a Roman guard on the Sabbath. The only thing in context that makes any sense is the Romans must have gone over the hill before the women showed up. Because if it was a question of 3 or 4 women or 16 Romans, guess who just lost that fight? So nobody in the world but a Roman soldier could possibly have told Matthew that at some time between sundown on Saturday night and sunrise of the day that we call the first Easter, an angel descended. The appearance of the angel was like lightning. There was a severe earthquake. The stone was rolled away. The God became like dead men. Jesus came out. Now that's first century language. There's no theologian of any denomination who's going to try to tell you that the Holy Spirit gave the writers of the Bible a supernatural language in which to write, a language that every generation would understand. That is not true. Each man wrote in the language he himself spoke with a vocabulary at his own command. And that's one of the reasons we have so many different translations of the Bible. It has to be retranslated every generation so that each generation has it in the language they themselves speak. I do not speak the same English my father did. Over half of you don't speak the same English I do. You're a different generation. And I know what I'm talking about. I got a 25-year-old son. I swear we don't even communicate. Oh, we think alike. Dave travels around with an NIV under his arm most of the time. No matter where I go in the world, along about Wednesday or Thursday, he tracks me down. Always collect. Someday they'll learn to pay their own telephone bills. He said it's his job to make sure that I haven't become apostate and going over the hill with a blonde. He's got to keep me straight. It's different when your son's checking on you. I like it, but we don't communicate. The simplest word that everybody in this congregation understands is the word gay. I grew up understanding that word to mean happy, joyful, ebullient, merry, having a good time. Does somebody want to tell me it means that today? If that word were in the Bible more than the one time it does appear in the KJV, in James, something about gay clothing, it's no problem. We'd have to retranslate every copy of the Bible there was to make it mean what the original language meant. What I'm saying is that if you really think about it, you know doggone well that the meanings of words change from one generation to another. In less than one generation, the meaning of that word has changed over 180. Matthew was a first century Jew. He was writing in first century Greek. Was he saying something that the people of his generation understood perfectly and we don't? Was he using words, I've made my point, the Greek's famous for it, that have more than one meaning? We had to find out. We took that story apart almost a syllable at a time, only looking for answers to our own questions. We found our key in the word earthquake, seismos, seismic, seismology, seismograph. But the literal translation of that word then and today is a severe commotion. The only important thing being, where is the commotion happening? If it's in the ground, a seismos is an earthquake. If the commotion is in the air, then and today you would translate it wind, gale, tempest.